What is the single greatest comeback story of all time? Girl I went to high school with, cancer survivor as a child, had kids as a teenager, absent parents, bad people around her altogether, rough family in a rough part of town, no car, no nothing. Managed to still graduate high school, top of her class, got into a nursing program, got on the bus and went to nursing program with 2 kids strapped to her that she constantly had to deal with admin, other classmates complaining, got her nursing degree, kept doing school plus nursing career plus raising kids all alone, no family support, no SO, and now is a very prominent nurse administrator at a local hospital making 6 figures. Kids turn into hardworking teenagers, she runs outreach programs and is a pillar of her community, and still just the friendliest, funniest, smartest, most driven person. Wow! She had determination on a whole new level. It's honestly amazing. Story 2. Sumo wrestler Rikishi Terunofuji Haruha. He reached the second highest rank, Ozeki, before devastating knee injuries crippled him in 2017. He withdrew from several tournaments, leading to him dropping down to the second lowest division, Jonidan, before beginning to fight again in 2019 and managed to climb back through all the ranks and eventually take the white rope, being promoted to the highest rank, Yokozuna, in 2021. He would win 10 top division championships before retiring in 2025 and is now the coach of the Isegahama stable. Story 3. Cyberpunk 2077. The hype was indescribable. They delayed it like 4 times and it was still a piece of crap when it launched. Still, the developers stuck with it, patch after patch, update after update. Now, around 5 years later after it first launched, it's a pretty freaking good game. It's the best video game comeback story of all time. The only competitor is No Man's Sky. Story 4. I always cite this example. The Yankees were a better team going into the playoffs, and I say that as someone who hates the Yankees. When it was 3-0, no one thought the Red Sox would win 1 more after that, let alone 4. That was beyond all comprehension. I saw it unfold. The Yankees got smug, lost the next, having nearly won but still felt confident. Then they lost the next, and the smugness started to crack. Not a lot. They had to win only 1 more of the next 3, and then they lost another, and then they lost another. That Game 7, I knew they were screwed. They bobbled the ball, they didn't have the bullpen, and you could see the Sox were exceedingly hungry for it. Before that first pitch in Game 7, it was over. The Yankees couldn't beat that drive. You could see it. It was glorious. Screw the Yankees. Then they went on to beat the Cardinals in a sweep. That team won 8 games in a row. They had games of almost no hitters through 7 and shutouts in the World Series. They were absolutely not going to be denied. They were suddenly unstoppable, having been incredibly, very nearly relegated to another postseason loss. I'd love to know what clicked at that moment between Game 3 and Game 4 in the ALCS, because whatever it was, you could bottle it and then run cities off of its power. It's the greatest comeback I've ever seen, one of the greatest in sports history, by a team that had gone 4 score without a series win. And then all their fans became schmucks and it was squandered. Orioles fan here. Story 5. David Lynch's film Mulholland Drive. It was originally a TV pilot that ABC decided not to pick up as a series. That seemed like the sad end of the story. It happens all the time. People put all that work and hope into a pilot, but it doesn't pan out, so they lick their wounds and move on to something else. But then, a year later, a light bulb went off above Lynch's head. Maybe if he filmed new scenes to give the pilot an ending, then he could turn it into a proper film. Luckily, it had been made on 35mm film, not standard definition video. To cut a long story short, now Mulholland Drive regularly appears on greatest films of all time lists. Story 8. The Romans at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC have to be up there. The legendary Hannibal Barca had crushed them in several battles leading up to it, and Rome was essentially on its knees and made one last attempt to quell Hannibal and put an end to the Punic Wars. This was before Rome really took off too. If they hadn't won that battle, who knows, but life as we know it today would probably be very different considering how important the Romans were. Story 7. The Miracle of Istanbul in 2005, AC Milan vs Liverpool Champions League final. The biggest prize in European football at stake, AC Milan had arguably the best player in the world in each position against a Liverpool team who had finished 5th in the Premier League that year. By halftime, AC Milan were 3-0 up and Liverpool were all over the place. Plus, they were forced into an early substitution in the first half. Because Harry Kewell was made of merengue, their left back, typically a defender for those unfamiliar, John Arne Riise, ended up playing at left midfield, and famously god-awful Jimmy Traore then slotted in behind him. At this point, Liverpool had 3 attack-minded players on the pitch. Milan Barros, misfired all season, never looked competent at the club. Louis Garcia, bags of potential, but not someone who could turn a game around on his own. And Steven Gerrard. In the second half, the underdog scrapped for every duel and challenge, and within a 6-minute window had brought it back to 3-3. Nothing separated the teams at the end of normal time. During extra time, Steven Gerrard, Liverpool captain, hometown hero, played through cramp and his teammates dropping with exhaustion to drag them through a siege from Milan. To make things even more stressful for Liverpool fans, their manager, Rafa Benitez, was famously conservative in his approach and waited until the 85th minute to put on another attacking player. Goalkeeper Jerzy Dudek made a double-point blank save from the best striker in the world, Shevchenko. It goes to penalties and Liverpool win it. Many of the Milan players said they consider it their lowest point in their career. Some considered retirement. It's the most spectacular, unlikely comeback of all time. If you haven't already, go watch it on YouTube. It dwarfs any other sports comeback I've ever seen. Story 8. In the early 19th century, Edmond Dantes was betrayed and framed for treason by his best friend and worst person of all time, Ferdinand Mondego, who also stole Edmond's girl. Edmond was imprisoned for life in Napoleonic-era Alcatraz. No one had ever escaped until now. Dante swapped places in a body bag with a cadaver so prison staff would throw him off a cliff. His fall miraculously avoided the jagged rocks where the sea crashed against the walls of French Alcatraz, and he escaped the body bag before he could drown. Driven by rage, he swam miles to shore during a storm, discovered a lost treasure, assembled a ragtag crew of misfits with a variety of peculiar talents, and plotted the most epic, thorough, and satisfying revenge of all time. Story 9. MotoGP has just experienced a really fascinating one. It will be a movie one day. Marc Marquez, MM93, a young prodigy rider, arrives on the scene and proceeds to dominate for years for Honda. Injuries take their toll, surgeries leave his body broken, and concussions leave him battling diplopia. He stops mid-championship to get his arm reset by 36 degrees. He comes back to a bike that has lost its development edge and is now clearly behind the other bikes. Many more crashes as he battles to catch up, close to the point of retirement. He takes a €25 million pay cut to ride an independent Ducati for free. He tastes winning again. The Ducati factory chose him over the current world champion. He absolutely dominates again and wins the championship. He gets taken out and injured at the very next race and has to sit out the rest of the year. Story 10. 2019 St. Louis Blues Stanley Cup champions. The Blues started the season poorly and fired head coach Mike Yeo on November 19 after a 7-9-3 start. Assistant coach Craig Berube took over as interim coach. By early 2019, the Blues had the league's worst record, 15-18-4, but rookie goalie Jordan Binnington sparked a turnaround with a shutout in his first start on January 7. The team went on an 11-game winning streak and finished 30-10-5 to secure a playoff spot. In the playoffs, they beat the Jets, the Stars, and Sharks to reach their first Stanley Cup final since 1970. The Blues defeated the Bruins in 7 games on June 12, 2019, winning their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. Story 11. Harry Maguire. The man was made fun of, hated, and was getting threats for playing badly. Even the Member of Parliament of Ghana used him to make a point and compared Maguire's playing to the Ghanaian vice president's mismanagement of the economy. The MP said that Maguire was the most dangerous player on the field, but for his own team. He wasn't sold in the 2023-24 season and said he wanted to fight for his place, where he became the last-choice defender. He trained on his own in the preseason and only got playing time due to the club having an injury crisis. He showed that he's back in form and playing well. He took the starting place of Varane, who was considered one of the best center backs and the best CB in the club at the time. Maguire is still at the club and is considered one of the better players there. He saved the team by scoring so many goals in the last minutes of games. He is now beloved by the fans, had his comeback story, and even the Ghana MP apologized to him. Story 12. Donald J. Trump. In 2016, no one really gave him a chance of becoming U.S. president, and he was treated negatively by the media all the time. In 2020, Biden became president. Trump was prosecuted and found guilty of several crimes. In 2024, an attempt was made on his life. This was followed by another attempt on Trump. Now he is U.S. president again. Story 13. I'm going to get downvoted for this, and I will preface it by saying I absolutely hate the man and wish this weren't true, but it might be Trump. The fact that he could lord over January 6th, become a convicted felon, and win back the White House has got to be one of the most stupefying and amazing comeback stories of all time. Think about that happening 30 years ago. I cannot stand him. I wish he wasn't I'm Our Lives, but I do respect the comeback from the dead. Most people can't get out of bed and flip burgers properly. Story 14. GOAT, greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, from exile and disgrace to reclaiming the heavyweight title, the embodiment of resilience and conviction. BOAT, best of all time, Steve Jobs, fired from Apple, then came back to rebuild it into the world's most valuable company. Moat, the meekest of all time, Lance Armstrong, his quote-unquote comeback looked legendary until the truth burned it all down. Coat, the coolest of all time, Robert Downey Jr., from Fixation and Arrest to becoming Iron Man and Hollywood's highest paid actor. Throat, that history remembers of all time, Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, then became president and global moral compass. Bloat, best luck of all time, Elvis Presley, 68 comeback special, one TV special revived a fading icon and restored his legacy overnight. Gloat, greatest loser of all time, Mike Tyson, tried to reinvent himself after prison, never fully recovered the aura. Float, fundamentally lacking of all time, Kanye West, endless attempts at reinvention without true redemption, brilliance buried under ego. Stout, strategic thinker of all time, Martha Stewart, turned prison into a PR pivot, emerged more powerful than before. Wrote, rarest of all time, Tiger Woods, 2019 Masters, 11 years after scandal and surgery he stunned the world with one final peek. Shout, surprising hero of all time, Britney Spears, freed from her conservatorship, reclaiming her autonomy and narrative. Croat, celebrated representative of all time, Michael Jordan, 95-96 return, left, played baseball, came back and led the Bulls to another three-peat. Groat, greatest rivalry of all time, Rocky Balboa versus Father Time, fictional but, immortal, the ultimate cinematic metaphor for the comeback spirit. Dote, dumbest of all time, Charlie Sheen tried to brand his meltdown as a comeback, it became a cautionary tale. Sloat, surprising legend of all time, Johnny Cash, from washed-up user to elder statesman of American music with American recordings. Story 15. Roy Benavidez stepped on a mine in Vietnam and was told he'd never walk again. Within 2 years, he retrained himself to walk and try to get back into the army, but they'd only offer an office position. His workaround was to become a Green Beret, where they'd have to let him redeploy. During this deployment, he heard of a stranded squadron of American soldiers and got a helicopter pilot to fly him to their location, where he jumped out of this helicopter behind enemy lines with nothing but a knife and rushed to the squadron surrounded by a battalion. He battled with this wounded squadron for 6 hours and was able to get a number of them evacuated. Roy survived the ordeal with 37 different wounds caused by bayonet, bullet, and grenade shrapnel. Story 16. If you're interested in esports at all, I think Team OG's run in Dota 2 at the International 2018, essentially Dota 2's Super Bowl, takes the cake. This team was doing very well the previous year, winning major tournaments and such, but started lacking in results leading up to the International 2018. To make matters worse, 2 of their best players, and one is the best friend of the captain/owner at the time, decided to leave last second and join a different team, leaving them having to find replacements. Not only that, but OG now has to qualify via open qualifiers. So their coach has to fill in as a core player, and the last player is just some guy who was top rank in the public leaderboards but had no professional Dota experience whatsoever. They end up fighting tooth and nail in open qualifiers and win it, but they have to also win closed qualifiers against all the teams that won in open qualifiers. Again, they win it all while everyone was doubting them, just waiting until they would lose, but they don't. They end up finding momentum to a point where they start doing unconventional things that the teams couldn't really figure out how to counter in time. Eventually, they win the whole thing. Still, people call their run a fluke. They go on to stomp on everyone the next year and become the first TI winners to win it twice in a row. Story 17. There's been a handful of NFL players that leave the game for a year or two and have an impactful return. Russ Francis comes to mind. Tony Mandarick was the second overall pick at the 1989 draft and touted as the best offensive line prospect in NFL history. Almost immediately, he was disappointing in rookie camp and, before long, labeled an all-time worst bust. He was completely washed out of the league by 1992. After nearly a 5-year hiatus, he returned to the NFL to play 3 years for the Colts. He wasn't all-pro level, but by all accounts, he was a solid starter and locker room leader. During his 5-year absence, he didn't play in the XFL, the CFL, NFL Europe, or any other barnstorming league. He didn't play a down of football for any team at any level, yet he was able to come back and be solid for 3 years. Other than him, it's unheard of. Story 18. In 1956, 82 soldiers had their small, overloaded yacht meant for 20 people basically crash or capsize off the coast of a country that was guarded by 20 to 25,000 soldiers. This country was also supported by and allied to the United States. Of those 82 men, only 12 survived the dangers of drowning and the well-funded local military. Those 12 men hid in nearby mountains and jungles while being hunted by the 20,000 or so soldiers. One of their top military commanders would often collapse from asthma attacks even during battles. He lived through the war. Despite the brutal conditions of the jungles and mountains, those 12 men soon recruited local farmers and peasants and eventually took control of Cuba, eventually allying with the Soviet Union. Fidel Castro, one of those 12 men, became the leader of Cuba and outlasted 10 American presidents as a country's top executive leader. Eisenhower through Bush Jr., Castro survived over 638 attempts from the American CIA, mainly for nationalizing the American companies in Cuba and allowing the USSR to reciprocate to America, stationing nuclear warheads in Turkey by stationing Soviet warheads in Cuba, allowing a retaliatory attack if those American missiles in Turkey were ever launched at the USSR. Cuba still remains an essentially communist nation with most, if not all, industries owned by the country. Story 19. In 1996, an amateur co-ed basketball team called the Toon Squad, comprised of cartoon characters, a washed-up basketball player, and Bill Murray, came back from a 100-point second-half deficit against the Monstars to win their freedom and avoid eternal slavery on an alien planet. The victory was inconceivable given that the Monstars had illegally stolen the basketball talents of actual NBA players through advanced quantum basketball synthesis technology, which had yet to be recognized and outlawed by the NBA as a performance-enhancing drug. This bylaw loophole put the Toon Squad at a massive disadvantage, forcing them to rely on a pair of 3-foot-tall bunny rabbits for much of their playmaking and shot creation, while their star player, renowned baseball player Michael Jordan, suffered from rust and confidence issues on the hardwood. Every analyst predicted an easy Monstars win, but against all odds, the Toon Squad prevailed. To this day, it is the largest single-game comeback of all time in any sport. Those who were alive to see it have described it as the greatest comeback story of all time. You know? If you know, you know. Story 20. Touching the Void. During a hike down in the middle of a severe winter weather event that came out of nowhere once they ascended the peak, from a previously unclimbed mountain face in Peru, Joe Simpson fell and broke his leg. His climbing partner, Simon Yates, tied Simpson to him with a rope and attempted to descend. On the descent, Joe fell off the edge of a cliff. Yates was able to stop the fall before he fell with him, but had no vision of what was over the cliff as there was a nasty snowstorm going on. With Joe dangling over the edge in no man's land, Yates had to make the gut-wrenching choice to cut the rope and go down solo, knowing that his partner was almost certainly not going to be able to make it alone on one leg. Simpson fell into a crevasse on one leg. He was able to escape the darkness of the crevasse and find an exit on the surface of the glacier. He crawled for 3 days to base camp only a few hours before his partner had planned to leave and head back to civilization. Story 21. No Man's Sky. The internet historian plagiarized at least Man in Cave, and that's wrong, and you shouldn't do that. But he made a great video about No Man's Sky, and you should watch it. No Man's Sky, the video game, is a space exploration game, procedurally generated with a huge amount of stars and planets and things. Before launch, it was being developed by a super small team. It started getting attention, too much attention, even from Sony. It took the game under their wing and started promoting it, collector's editions and all. The untrained media head guy and the team got in over their heads. They overpromised, not necessarily in bad faith. They just thought they could do and add all these features, but when the ball got rolling, they just couldn't finish before the deadline. The game was released, pretty bad. It made a lot of money. People were angry, partly because the Sony endorsement, collector's edition, and promises of features all spoke to a very polished AAA game, but it wasn't. Had it been released cheap as an early access indie game, it wouldn't have been a big deal at all. But the game and the head, Sean Murray, especially, got blasted up, down, sideways, in, out, downtown, 7 ways to Sunday. They even went into hiding and instead of bailing with the money, have spent countless years making phenomenal improvements to the now beloved game, all for no extra money. They just accepted their clowning, recognized their failures, and stood on business. No Man's Sky is still buggy a bunch, but damn, it is a different game. They earned the community's trust back and then some. Story 22. Karoy Takac is probably the toughest athlete I have ever heard of. He was Hungary's top pistol marksman in the 1930s, expected to dominate the 1940 Olympics. Then, disaster hit in 1938 when a grenade accident blew up his dominant right hand. But he refused to give up. He trained secretly, taught himself everything from scratch with his left hand, and worked his way right back to the elite level. Just imagine, he couldn't even write with his left hand before that. Then, the universe tested him again. The 1940 and 1944 Olympics were canceled because of World War II, wiping out his prime and letting younger competitors rise. So, in 1948, at age 38, he finally got his opportunity. He showed up and took gold. Then he returned in 1952 and won gold again. He became the first person ever to win back-to-back Olympic titles in rapid-fire pistol firing. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 23. Leicester City 2015-2016 Premier League season. Even if you don't watch football, soccer, this one deserves a spot in the greatest comebacks of all time, Hall of Fame. So here's the context. Leicester City was basically a nobody. The year before, they were one bad week away from getting relegated, kicked out of the top league entirely. Their players weren't superstars, most had been rejected by bigger clubs. Their manager, Claudio Ranieri, was considered a nice guy, but way past his prime. The team's goal for the season? Just don't get relegated again. Bookmakers put them at a 5,000 to 1 odds to win the league. To put that in perspective, those are the same odds as Elvis being found alive. Then, the impossible happened. They started winning and kept winning. People thought it was a fluke, a few lucky games, until suddenly they were beating the richest clubs in the world: Manchester City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, teams with budgets 10 times bigger and rosters full of international stars. By the end of the season, Leicester wasn't just surviving, they were champions, 5,000 to 1, a team built on heart, chemistry, and the football equivalent of main character energy. It's not just a sports story, it's the reminder that sometimes life really does hand out miracles, and that the little guys can win the biggest stage of all. Story 24. As a gamer, the PS3. Its reveal went horribly, and while the launch was solid, it struggled significantly for the first 2.5–3 years, until it really hit its stride in 2009 with games like Killzone 2, Infamous, and of course Uncharted 2. This, combined with the amazing It Only Does Everything ad campaign, and the Kevin Butler character who was so popular the character had stage time at Sony's E3 conference the following year, and the price dropped to $299. No other console before Sega Saturn and Dreamcast or since Xbox One, Series X, Wii U has managed to not just turn things around in the same generation but also beat its direct competitor. Story 25. The Seahawks beating the Packers in the 2014 NFC Championship game. Down 16-0 at halftime, the Seahawks comeback started with a touchdown from a fake field goal. Trailing 19-7 with only about 5 minutes left in the game, they took the lead with a touchdown followed by an onside kick recovery, and another touchdown capped off with a wild 2-point conversion. Green Bay tied the score with time expiring, but Seattle wins the coin toss in overtime and ends the game when Jermaine Kearse catches a bomb in the end zone for the walk-off touchdown. Story 26. I was playing League of Legends with a few of my friends and we were getting crushed. I think we were losing like 3-30 at one point. My friends were spamming surrender, but each time I'd managed to convince a different one of them not to surrender, even though it was basically hopeless. They had a Vayne that was like 12-0, just mowing us down. I kept saying, "We have to take down the Vayne, we have to take down the Vayne, duh." But it was like trying to fistfight a buzzsaw. I was Viegar, I had the best KDR on our team, and it was still negative. They just kept eliminating us over and over and over again for what seemed like forever. They came in and destroyed almost all of our towers, then they went back and healed. But here's the thing, it seemed like forever because the game had gone on forever. Finally, they'd had enough and came to end us. Our towers had respawned around the Nexus. Vayne starts mowing me down, chases me under our towers, and rolls back when she sees it's too risky, even though I was almost going to be out. But instead of running away, I blinked after her and caught her in my stun, just long enough for Alistair to wombo combo her and for the team to pounce on her while I full rotationed her. Her team rushed in, but she was already out, and we wiped them under our towers with all of us surviving. We look at the fall timers, our inhibitors respawn on cue, and we realize we just won the game. I use my speedy crown thing and we rush up the middle with a huge creep wave and DPS the towers down before they can respawn. We had like 10 takedowns total to 30 plus falls. We literally only won a single engagement all game and it was the last one. Story 27. Sebastian Vettel winning the Formula 1 World Championship in 2012. After the 11th round with only 9 races left in the season, he was third in the championship, 42 points back from Fernando Alonso. After the 13th round with only 7 races left, he was fourth, 39 points back, after a retirement each over the previous 2 races for them. It was over, the run ends here. Then the next 7 races, a legendary comeback performance for the ages. First with Fernando torpedoed, first now with the championship lead, first. Then came Abu Dhabi. A rule breach meant he was supposed to start last. Then his team decided to change the whole setup, so he started from the pit lane. Then he damaged his front wing and it was all over. That was a comeback attempt gone. Surely at a track where you cannot overtake, Alonso would also take 25 points. Nope, Vettel put in the drive of a lifetime to drive back to third. Even Fernando was surprised at him being on the podium. Second in America meant Vettel held a 13-point lead heading to the final race. Surely it was his now. First lap, first corner in Brazil. Another driver, referring to Senna, though not the same one as the legendary Ayrton Senna, probably, just drove to the side of him, spun last by a long way, cracked exhaust, destroyed floor, and that was it, that was over. Then, just like every other time he has lost in this story, he got his head right, drove back up, and dug hard to finish sixth. With Fernando second, that was enough to win the championship by 3 points. It was the middle of a 4 consecutive championship run. Everyone said it was only because he had the best car during those 4 seasons, but this one season alone showed that Vettel was a championship driver in his own right. He knows how to cope with pressure, knows how to perform when needed, not just cruise to a title. Story 28. Alex Zanardi, an ex-Formula One driver, lost both of his legs, severed in a racing crash in 2001. He should have passed away. Somehow, he picked himself up and won back-to-back gold medals in hand cycling at the Paralympics in 2012 and 2016. Since then, fate has continued to be unkind to him with a bad hand cycling crash in 2020, doctors putting him into a coma. And then when he was released to convalesce at home, his house burned down. Before he got into hand cycling, he was back behind the wheel in the Touring Car Championships for 5 seasons, 2005 to 2009, scoring 4 career victories and coming an impressive 10th in his first season. This guy doesn't know when he's beaten. Story 29. Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks in the playoffs against the Phoenix Suns in 2022. The Suns just came of a league-high regular season wins and were expected to win. Devin Booker and the Suns were 2-0, then it became 2-2. In Game 5, it became 3-2 for the Suns, and in that game, Devin Booker mocked Luka Doncic after Booker fell to the ground and looked into the camera, calling it the Luka Special. After that game, Luka walked off the court to the locker rooms and simply said, "Everybody acting tough when they're up." The next game turned 3-3, and we move on to Game 7. Luka Doncic then puts on a masterclass of a Game 7, completely destroying the Suns and giving a new definition to the Luka Special. The picture of Luka staring down Booker like a psychopath enjoying his pain is imprinted in my brain at this point. Story 30. In sports, Liverpool vs AC Milan 2005 in Istanbul. Liverpool went 3-0 down before halftime against an AC Milan team absolutely bubbling with world-class players in every position. It looked like it was going to be a huge blowout, possibly the biggest victory in a Championships League final of all time. Then Steven Gerrard came out during the second half and put on an absolute captain's masterclass and grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck and dragged Liverpool back to 3-3 scoreline. Then Liverpool won on penalties. The underdog had done the impossible. Story 31. Mine is only of someone I personally know, not anyone in the world. A friend of mine had a stroke. 6 months later, he was not only driving, but taking flying lessons. He was in his early 50s, age-wise. Before the stroke, he was a chubby guy at about 250 pounds. 6 months later, I barely recognized him. He had lost about 50 pounds, had a square jaw, and looked like someone who could kick some butt. Hyperbaric therapy was a big part of his recovery. In addition to the physical therapy his doctors had him doing, he went into a hyperbaric chamber every day for about 3 months. The only downside is that the FAA did make him stop taking flying lessons. They didn't believe the recovery story, so he had to stop. Or maybe they believed it, but just don't allow people who've had a stroke to fly under any circumstances. His doctors told him that his recovery was one of the best they've ever seen. Not surprisingly, the rare recoveries that were similar to him also involved people who supplemented their recovery with hyperbaric therapy. I should note that hyperbaric doesn't work for everyone. With his success in using it, I tried it myself. I didn't really feel any better than I did before after a month of treatments. Story 32. Stephen Donald, also known as the Beaver. There's a movie about him called The Kick, released in 2014. He's a rugby player who played for the greatest team to ever play. However, he was deemed unnecessary for the World Cup squad in 2011. New Zealand had 4 players in the same position throughout their games go down to injuries but still made the final. The Beaver was out fishing when he got the call-up to save their campaign. He came back out of shape, not match fit, put on a jersey that was tighter than his own skin because they were not prepared for him, and helped the NZ All Blacks win the Rugby World Cup by kicking a penalty goal, 3 points, which led to New Zealand winning by 1 point against France. Story 33. Britney Spears, twice over. Her career was almost dead in the water because of her public meltdown in 2007, but then she proceeded to release some of the best music of her career in the years that followed. Then she had another comeback story in her personal life years later when she was freed from her oppressive conservatorship. Now she's just vibing. As an added bonus, with what we know about mental health now, as well as Britney's own background, most people these days agree that Britney was treated unfairly at the time of her meltdown. Story 34. I am partial to the story of Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Dude Love, Mankind, Mama Foley's baby boy. In a time of giants, he was pretty average height. In a sea of muscle-bound genetic anomalies, he was just a big old dude. In a world of clean-shaven baby faces, he looked like a wild man. He didn't look like any other professional wrestler. He didn't work like any other professional wrestler, and he didn't talk like any other professional wrestler, in a place where being different usually meant not being employed, at best, and being turned into a lowest common denominator stereotype at worst. He went from sleeping in his car to a world heavyweight champion. He is one of the most recognizable faces in professional wrestling and one of its most beloved figures. Story 35. Tony Lomi, on the last day at his factory job before Black Sabbath was going on their first tour, he got the ends of 2 of his fingers off to the first knuckle. He was about to give up, but a friend stopped by and brought a record of a guitarist with 2 fingers, Django Reinhardt, I think. Tony didn't know this. The friend plays a record, asks Tony what he thinks, and Tony said, "That's pretty good." Then the friend says, "This guy plays that with only 2 fingers on his fretting hand." So Tony figured he had no good excuse, made some homemade thimbles to protect the ends of the fingers, and carried on. He also introduced lower tunings because these slackened strings made it easier to play, and it ended up adding heaviness to the sound. Dave Mustaine has overcome a lot too. He sounds like a real schmuck sometimes and is difficult to work with, but he's been through some hardship and keeps going, and is one of the top thrash metal guitarists and is a leader in creating that sound. That's 2 of my favorite famous people's comebacks, but I gotta say, the personal stories here of overcoming a hard childhood or recovering from bad decisions are way more impressive to me. Story 36. Beck Weather's story of surviving the 1996 blizzard on Mount Everest is the single most unbelievable comeback/survival story I have ever heard in my life. He was at one point blinded by the effects of high altitude, and as a complication of recent eye surgery. His survival story is a bit complicated to recount, but he was presumed to not survive on 2 occasions throughout the ordeal due to his severe frostbite and severely weakened physical state. At one point, he woke up from a hypothermic coma, got up, and walked by himself to the temporary safety of the nearby Camp 4, where the climbers had sought shelter from the blizzard. Even there, he survived another night against all expectations. Story 37. For me, a dear friend of mine and her husband. They were both fixated to substances, and their relationship was tumultuous for ages. They got into a fight, and things got physical, and he was arrested. She was already starting to turn things around, and she went super low contact. They had a daughter together, so she still had to keep some contact. He realized that he wasn't going to have a relationship with his daughter unless he got his crap together. He went to rehab, got a good job, and they very slowly reconnected and rebuilt their relationship from a friendship back to partners. Now they're back together with a second baby, and they've both been clean for going on 6 years. He's actually a really decent dude. Opiates will really mess with your personality and mood. I'm ridiculously proud of both of them. Story 38. Late to this conversation, but for me there is only one answer. Jason McCartney. He was an AFL player. He was in Bali and near one of the bombs that occurred during the Bali bombings. Initially, he thought he only had some minor injuries, so he went about helping others. He ended up having burns to over 50% of his body. He had to get a special charter plane home to Melbourne, where he almost passed away on the surgery table. His recovery was remarkable. He married his fiancée 63 days after the bomb and returned to AFL for one final game just 237 days later. He came on as a substitute and kicked a goal, helping his team win the game. He announced his retirement in the post-match interviews, basically said he was physically exhausted from the recovery, and he wanted to end on a high note. He was only 29 when he retired. Story 39. Ernie Irvan deserves an honorable mention. In 1994, he and Dale Earnhardt Sr. were the 2-horse race for the Winston Cup Championship, with Ernie looking stronger. Ernie was driving the Robert Yates Racing number 28 car because his good friend, Davey Allison, had passed away in a helicopter crash the previous year. The whole team wanted to do it for Davey and his family, along with denying Earnhardt what would have been his record-tying 7th national championship. During practice for the return race at Michigan International Speedway, MIS, Irvin had a mechanical failure and slammed the outside wall. A very long story short, he was given about a 10% chance of making it through the night, but the doctors did their jobs. A few weeks later, he left the hospital and began a long road to recovery. He returned to full-time driving in NASCAR in 1996. Earnhardt did win his 7th in 1994 with a race in hand. That's how far in front of the field they were. In 1997, on Father's Day, Ernie Irvan won the Miller Lite 400 at Michigan International Speedway. Story 40. I've got to go with the Boston Red Sox in 2004 ALCS, down 0-3 against New York. They came back to win that series, something that had never been done in history. Kurt Schilling pitched in Game 6 after having surgery on his foot the day before and bled into his shoe, turned his sock red, and won that game. Game-winning home runs in Game 4 and 5, if I recall. So much drama during that series, and combined with the curse, it was a perfect sport experience. A close second, maybe even better, was Ben Hogan's comeback after his car crash in 1949. It was questionable if he'd ever walk again with a broken pelvis and everything else. He won the 1950 US Open and a bunch of other championships the following years. Sports stories are the best. Story 41. We're all probably too young, but I have not seen Richard Nixon mentioned yet. Although I wouldn't have voted for him had I been around back then, he had a quick rise from an unknown to a presidential candidate in just over 10 years. He was a congressman, then vice president, ran for president in 1960 and lost. He then ran for governor of California in 64 and lost. He managed to secure the GOP presidential nomination again in 1968 and won. He was re-elected in a landslide in 1972, then it all blew up in his face. But losing two major elections like that would have put to bed anyone's chances of a successful run in our time, probably. Story 42. Lemmy from Motorhead. He is literally one of the biggest rock icons in the world. He got fired from his band Hawkwind from getting caught at customs with substances. Before that, he was a roadie for Jimi Hendrix. He is absolutely not what you would call a talented singer or bassist, but he made his own band called Motorhead and decided to sing since he couldn't find anyone else. What's even more impressive is he was around 30 at this stage, so well past by most people's standards before reaching actual fame. They didn't get big until he was about 35. Not only did he manage to become famous and successful with Motorhead, he wrote two of Ozzy Osbourne's biggest songs and is idolized by pretty much every rock, metal, and punk musician out there. Story 43. Daniel Inouye. He was a high school senior on the morning of December 7th, 1941, getting dressed for church, just tying his tie, when the news came over the radio that Pearl Harbor was under attack. Daniel and his father went out into the backyard and looked toward the base. They saw the smoke from anti-aircraft guns and then 3 Zeros flew overhead. Instead of going to church, the two men went to the Red Cross aid station to help take care of the injured and wounded. The day he graduated high school, Daniel tried to enlist in the armed services. He was told that even though he was a native-born citizen of the United States, he was somehow also an enemy alien and not fit to put on the uniform because of his ethnic heritage. So he enrolled in college, pre-med, and started writing letters. It took 2 years, but Daniel and thousands of other Americans like him were finally heard when they begged to be able to serve their country. On February 1st, 1943, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team was activated, consisting entirely of Japanese-American enlisted men, commanded by white officers. They fought in Italy, they rescued the Lost Battalion at Bifontaine, they liberated a satellite camp of Dachau. They remain to this day the most decorated unit in American military history. Daniel lost an arm at San Terenzo and was awarded the Medal of Honor. His dreams of becoming a surgeon were over, so he ran for the state house instead. On the day that Hawaii became a state, Daniel Inouye was its first representative, and in 1962, he became a United States Senator. Story 44. Tyson Fury. In 2015, he beat Vladimir Klitschko to become a heavyweight champion, but then had to relinquish the title due to substance problems that arose before the scheduled rematch with Klitschko. Fury cited mental health problems, including depression, that he was tackling during this time as well. In one interview, he said he didn't want to live, and the only thing stopping him from ending himself was the fact he's a Christian. Fury also became overweight. Fury had to reapply for his boxing license in 2018 after a legal battle with UCAD regarding his doping charge. Fury returned to the ring in May 2018 against Sefer Safari. Then in December 2018, he fought Deontay Wilder for the WC heavyweight title, which ended in a controversial draw. If his overall comeback wasn't enough, he also had a miraculous comeback in the fight against Wilder where Fury looked to be knocked out, but managed to beat the 10 count and finish the fight. Story 45. Okay, I'm eating at a breakfast diner, and there is an older gentleman sitting next to me at the counter. He stands up to leave, and another old man sitting near him looks at the guy's plate, and I guess he noticed that he didn't really eat a whole lot. He says to the old man as he's leaving, "People are starving and you're leaving food on the plate." The old man turns to the guy, looks at him for a second, and says, "People are starving and you're fat. What's the difference?" And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm just finishing my